Hey, what's up? So today I thought I'd show you all how to make some oven roasted carrots. Something that we do pretty often as a side for dinner. Pretty easy to make. Don't take a lot of prep time. Just main thing is being careful with your temperatures in the oven. So I'm going to kind of step you through that process, show you what seasonings I use, show you another big thing is the size that you actually cut the carrots and trying to make sure they're consistent. So going to step you through that process, and hopefully this is a way for you to start incorporating carrots into your meal routine. So nothing special about these carrots. We like to buy our carrots as like a wholesale carrot, so they don't come in a bag. So as I said before, we try not to have a lot of plastic. And if you look at the carrot, you can see I didn't peel it because I think peeling carrots is fairly stupid. The whole vegetable is edible, so there's no need for you to actually peel it. And something that I like to do when I cook is try and reduce food waste. So peeling the carrot is basically creating food waste where you don't have to have any. So what I like to do is start by just kind of nipping the ends, kind of get some of the more tough parts. Then cut the carrot not into pieces that are equal length, but you'll see in a minute, but equal length is okay. So I cut them up into kind of pieces that I would want to eat, and these are going to be cut down some more, but the length, this is like a length that I would have on my fork, and then I'm going to cut it some more so that it's a more bite-sized piece. But for a piece that's this size, you can just cut this in half twice. So cut it lengthwise one way, cut it lengthwise again, you get 4 pieces. So these are like 4 pieces that you can imagine putting in your mouth, picking up with a fork and not being too intrusive. So do that several times. So this one you can see I cut into 6 pieces because it's a little bigger. So when you're cooking vegetables, particularly at high heat for long periods of time, you want to make sure that everything is similar in size. And it's important for it to be similar in size because you don't want things to cook unevenly, because that's how you get burning, particularly when you cook them in the oven. And if it burns, that's not good for many reasons. One, it's not great for your cookware, depending on what cookware you're using. But it's also not great for your food, because that's food that you're probably now not going to eat, and it's going to end up in the trash can. So for one carrot, you can see that not everything's exactly the same size, but they're all pretty close to each other. So this is not cooking. Obviously there's science in cooking, but for me, cooking is much closer to an art form than it is a science. So I don't use rulers or anything like that. I think that'd be kind of absurd for most of the cooking that I do. So I have 5 carrots here. We're just gonna process these really quickly, get to the more fun part. And so what I like to do while I'm cutting up my carrots is I roast my potatoes in the, or not potatoes, carrots in the cast iron skillet. So if you watch the video where I went through all of my cookware, I talk about how I do a lot of roasted vegetables, and I talk about the utility and versatility of having cookware that can transition from the stove, or not even have to go on the stove, but can be used in the oven without special consideration. So my cast iron skillet is one of those pieces of cookware that I use for roasting vegetables quite often. And with cast iron, when you're going to cook with it in the oven, it's often recommended that you preheat it. So if you see this piece, I'll pause my story for a second, was a bit thicker than ones I've done before. So this piece I've cut into 3, and then so they're all even, I'm going to cut it into 3 again, so that way I end up with 9 pieces. So these are still pretty similar in size to everything else I've done, and same approach will be taken for this one. Be careful. So as I was saying, roasted vegetables in the cast iron skillet. So as I'm cutting these up, I already have my cast iron skillet in the oven, and it's basically getting preheated. So I like to roast my vegetables at 450 degrees, which may seem very high to you all, because a lot of recipes call for an oven at 350 degrees. I don't quite know how that was decided upon as the universal temperature to do all cooking, but I noticed that when you're roasting vegetables at that low temperature, they will cook, obviously, but a lot of the moisture doesn't really evaporate. So they cook, and then they can, if you do them too long, kind of turn to mush. I don't want mushy carrots. That's one reason why I'm roasting them instead of steaming them. So by doing it at 450, so 100 degrees Fahrenheit higher than kind of the standard temperature, what we're able to do is, one, cook them all the way through. At such a high temperature, you get a lot of evaporation of water off of the carrots, so they crisp up. And then because you already preheated your cast iron skillet, and also because you're doing it at a high temperature, you get some browning and some charring of the flesh of the carrot, such that you get kind of caramelization. So even though there's no sugar added to this and the seasoning, you're going to get the you're going to notice kind of a sweetness to them. Carrots have some kind of sweetness to them when you eat them, particularly when you saute them. But by roasting them at a high temperature, you're forcing a lot of those natural sugars in the carrot to break down and get caramelized as some people say, and it kind of really enhances the flavor. So end up with quite a bit of carrots. So next up with seasoning is going to be to drizzle some olive oil on top. And as far as the olive oil goes, you just want to add enough to coat the carrots. So I have no idea how much that is. If you've ever gotten a recipe from me, or I should say, one second. If you've ever asked me for a recipe, the first thing that I always say is that I don't measure anything. So a lot of what I do is just based on years of cooking and feel and what I think is right. So olive oil, and I'm adding some salt, which I know also seems like a lot, but it's not. Salt, and I like to do herbs. So this is rosemary that I'm sprinkling on. And the great thing about kind of getting this seasoning ratio down, so next I'm doing some thyme. And thyme is an herb that you want to be scarce with, because the flavor is very powerful even for a small amount. Adding some oregano. And this is, these carrots in particular I'm eating with a pasta dish, so I'm using oregano and basil, because those are kind of associated with Italian cooking with marinara sauce. I want the carrots to complement that flavor profile. And last, some parsley. But as I was saying, it takes some time to get used to the ratio of everything you should use. So just doing a mix, make sure all my herbs are distributed. And the nice thing about carrots, that if you want to do this with other vegetables like potatoes, another great thing to do it with. Sweet potato, you dice or cut the sweet potato into cubes, you can do the same thing. But carrots are a vegetable that you can eat raw. I mean, you can eat any vegetable raw, most of them, without cooking them, but carrots are actually palatable raw. So you can season it and then take a piece of the carrot with your seasoning, taste it and go, do I like the way this flavor is? If you like the flavor of it, then once you cook it, that flavor is just going to get enhanced. If you don't like the flavor of it, hopefully you didn't add too much of something, because it's kind of hard to take it away. I guess you could rinse it off, but it's kind of a waste. So be incremental about seasoning something like this, because it is easy to take a break and taste it and make sure it tastes well. All right, so I'm happening with my seasoning mix. Next up we're going to do is take the cast iron skillet out of the oven and add our carrots to it. So I'll try and get this in the shot. Drop my phone in the bowl of carrots. But the show goes on. Alright, this is a cast iron skillet. You can see it's very hot. It has some oil on there from some cooking I did last time. I dumped the carrots in. There's going to be a lot of sizzling, but that is a-okay. Next I want to spread them out so there's a lot of contact between the carrots and the skillet. That helps with that charring that I talked about before and that kind of browning. It also helps with good evaporation of the moisture. So this is going to go back in now. As I said, the oven's at 450. And I do these for about 45 minutes, which I know seems like a long time, but that's how long it takes to really get that good char and good flavor. And so what I do is about every 5 to 10 minutes I come back and I stir them around. Because the temperature is so high, if the carrots sit in one position for that long, the ones that are on the cast iron will start to burn. So I come back maybe every 5 to 10 minutes, kind of stir everything around and make sure that different surfaces of the carrot are touching the skillet so that there's no burning. So we'll come back and I'll show you the finished product. Maybe I'll do a few 5-10 minute or 5-10 second videos intermittently as I'm stirring, but if you stop watching here, you now can go away and make some roasted vegetables that will be pretty delicious. Alright, I'm going to check on these carrots. 10 minutes have passed, so we'll see what they're looking like. I'll judge things. Definitely hear them sizzling away. So as we kind of move them around, you might see that the bottom of some of them have started to darken. Completely fine. As I said, that's why we're doing this step, so that they don't burn, which doing things right, they won't burn, but moving them around so that different surfaces can now touch the skillet and take on different flavor, different texture. And as these cook, you'll notice that they're starting to shrink. And that's because the water's leaving. So that goes back in and probably come back in about another 10 minutes. So, see ya. Alright, back for another check and stir. See, it's 26 minutes now. Grab these out of the oven. Making good sound, sizzling still, which is a positive thing to hear. Typically, you want to close the oven once you open it and you're done with it, so that you don't let all the heat escape. But these are pretty quick sessions that I'm doing. So you can see this piece over here is starting to brown. You can see some right there. So that's what the carrots will start to look like all over. And you can see that they're now starting to take up even less space in the skillet. And that's, as I said before, got some evaporative loss of the water. So that was going back in. See you in another 10 minutes. Alright, back again for another check. At the 15-minute point, another 10 minutes have passed. Still hear that sizzling. So we're gonna give this another stir. Move them around. You can really see the color that it's picked up. So that's looking real good to me. Lost a lot of their size. They're not mushy. Something I pointed out earlier. Get this in focus. Not mushy because we're doing this at such a high temperature that that water is evaporating really quickly before the cellular structure of the carrots can really start to break down. So a lot of that structure is preserved just without the water. So it's, in some ways, we're kind of dehydrating the carrots. So that's good. I'm actually going to taste one right now, just to get an idea of where the flavor's at, where the texture's at. Really hot, but really good. So, put them back in. 14 minutes and it should be done.
You said it's gonna be less than $5, babe?
Back at it again. 7 minutes left. And based on where I saw that earlier, I think I'm probably gonna call it done. They're looking pretty good right now. Hear the sizzle. Taking on some good color. I like the texture that I see, I like the color. So I'm going to say that they're good. So even though there's 7 minutes left, you can leave them in a little longer if you want them a little darker, because none of them are burning, but I like the point that they're in right now. So I'll take another one to taste. I think it's pretty good. Good texture, good flavor. So one thing I'm going to do is just turn this timer off, turn the temperature off, then let these just sit in the oven. It's going to kind of take some of that residual heat. It's going to take some of that residual heat and still do a little cooking, but not as much as the temperature goes down. So that's just another way for me to kind of still get some of that flavor of additional cooking without actually cooking it much longer. So thanks for watching. Peace out. See you next video. Alright, so here's the final product after it kind of coasted in the oven as it was cooling down and everything. So check it out. As you remember, this whole skillet was covered with carrots, and now we are reduced to this. You can look at the color of it. Focus on it. You can see the kind of browning and charring. You see the skin. So this was the outside part. You can see it's kind of shriveled. It's not rigid, it's soft, but it's not mushy. So I'm applying some pressure with my fingers and it's not like turning into mush. Took a bite and it's delicious. So it still holds its shape, which, as I said, because it's not like cooking with all of that water for a long time, it's not getting mushy. The water is leaving pretty quickly before the cellular structure can really get damaged. So it still holds its shape without turning into a big pile of mush. So try it out. It's really good. Bon appetit.